Okay. Well, welcome to the Indigenous Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today I have Jordanna Saunders with me, and she is the founder and CEO of Trauma Recovery Services of Arizona. Thank you for being here with me. If you want to just introduce yourself, and then we'll get started with our conversation.
Yeah, hi. Like you said, my name's Jordanna. I'm originally from the Navajo Nation. I'm a member there, and I was born and raised there in New Mexico. I live here in the Phoenix metro area, and I founded Trauma Recovery Services, and really excited to be here and just kind of talk a little bit about our work that we do here in Arizona and just share our story.
Thank you. Thanks for being here with us. Just to get started, I'm really curious about what led you to starting your business. Like what was the journey leading up to it, and then like what prompted you to start the business?
Yeah, well, what leaded me to it really honestly was necessity, a necessity in several components. So I'm a mom. I have a teenage son, and my son has ADHD. And when he was younger, I've been in the mental health industry for over 20 years. And I was in management and always have done like hybrid positions, administrative and direct practice. And I just found that my son was always the first one to be dropped off at daycare, the last one to be picked up. He was just really struggling. And at the time, I was working in a tribal community. I was doing a ton of work there. I mean, I was working like 60, 70-hour work weeks. And it just wasn't very good for like my physical health, for my own mental health. The work was great, the pay was great, but like my quality of life really wasn't there. And so, my partner at the time was an entrepreneur and said, "Hey, have you ever thought of opening your own business?" And honestly, it wasn't like something that I thought of. I wasn't like, "Oh, I want to be a business owner." I just was like, "I can do that." It was sort of like this like light bulb moment of like, "Oh, yeah, you don't have to work for someone else. You can kind of take some control of your life, have a better quality of life, like create your own goals, create your own dream." And that sort of just led me to, I tell people I was like a chick in a couch in a suburb, right? And then COVID hit and the necessity changed. So then, as a BIPOC professional, I've always found that somehow BIPOC people always find me, no matter where I am. If I'm in rural Kansas, if I'm in a suburb, in a metro area, if I'm on a reservation. And so that was really like a place for me to kind of revisit like, what is my calling? Like, how can I best serve these people who are reaching out to me? Obviously, the need for mental health really surged during the pandemic, and it was sort of a pivot point for me of like, do I stay comfortable with just my couch and my small caseload of clients? Or do I learn this new technology of telehealth? Do I learn go back into management again? And so that's kind of what happened is I started hiring contractors and just sort of gathered that momentum very gradually, but it was through necessity. It was people calling and saying, "Hey, that person you referred me to, they didn't answer the phone or they're booked out for 4 months. Like, I'd rather wait to see you." And there's only one me, right? And so it was like, how do I serve this need in a way that is, you know, value aligned for me? And so that's kind of, like I said, necessity, like quality of life for me and quality care for people.
So what year did you found Trauma Recovery Services of Arizona?
2017.
Okay.
So pretty early, yeah.
Yeah. And then what exactly, so you provide telehealth. Can you tell us a little bit more about your business and what you guys do?
Sure. Yeah. So we provide telehealth in the state of Arizona. So we're licensed counselors and social workers. So we're master's level clinicians. We provide telehealth, which is secure end-to-end, transmission of information basically. And so our primary modality is live video. So kind of like we're doing right here, we have a secure platform that we use that's encrypted. And folks log in at their appointment time and they come in for a problem, right? It's either quality of life issues, like, hey, I'm not getting along with my boss, I'm not getting along with my partner, depression. But we also specialize in PTSD because we found that a lot of BIPOC folks have experienced a lot of whether it's discrimination, historical trauma, systemic trauma. It's like one trauma after another, after another, after another, a lot of grief. And so our business provides psychotherapy, typically individual, but we also provide groups. So we have a women's trauma group. We've also done veteran support groups. We've done some work with the Navajo Nation. We've done talking circles there. I've done talking circles there for the veterans. But primarily we do counseling, professional counseling services. We also do a lot of advocacy around trying to destigmatize mental health in our communities because we know that people need our services, but a lot of times that period between need, like where they needed it and could have gotten it to the time that they actually get it is really long. And so we're trying to just, spread information. So we do that through social media. I do that through like public speaking, engagement in local communities. But yeah, we specialize in trauma. We see ages 13 and up in the state of Arizona. We work with people here in the Phoenix metro area, and we are seeing more and more people from rural Arizona as well as from different tribes reaching out to us because again, we specialize in that. We employ BIPOC clinicians because it's important for us to represent the communities that we serve, and anybody who is not a BIPOC person that comes to work for us has to have social justice values alignment and understand that the work that we're doing is systemic work and it requires competencies, additional competencies beyond it, because I don't know if you know this, but like mental health is primarily, it's like 85% white women that are upper middle class. And so mental health services are really hard for BIPOC people to get. And it's really hard for them to be able to relate to folks because they don't have the same lived experiences. They don't understand the issues that they're coming in with, nor do they know like what the best treatment modalities are for that. We specialize in a kind of therapy called EMDR. So it's a neurological based intervention. It's called eye movement desensitization reprocessing and other trauma resolution therapies because, like I said, our populations tend to have significant trauma. And I wanted to make sure that everybody that we employed was skilled, capable, and interested in working with those populations. We have a hybrid model. We take commercial insurance. We also have private like contracts, and then we have a low no cost clinic. So 20% of our services are offered at low no cost.
That's amazing. And I think it's just really important that you emphasize them, like having those BIPOC counselors and therapists, because it really does make a difference. In my own experience, like attending therapy, I I tried out two different therapists, and the one that ended up being really good for me was the one that we kind of shared a similar background and understanding, like cultural understanding. Um, so it's really important, to have those resources and counselors who can relate to the people they're seeing in that type of way. Um, did you so you see that gap, like you've seen that gap and you're trying to kind of fill that gap with your business and what you're doing. Um, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you started off just you doing your own business, seeing your own patients, but you've grown since around the pandemic time. And now you have, I think I was on your website and you have quite a few people who work with you.
Mhm.
That's amazing. Are,
Yeah.
Are they like contractors or employees?
They're employees. So we have gone through that evolution as a business. I'm sure like entrepreneurs, we go through that where we're trying to find like the best fit. And so, when we started, we had kind of a combination of both. We had contractors, we had some hourly employees, and now everybody that works for us, aside from like specialty services, so like our web guys and things like that, they're contractors, they have their own businesses, but everybody that works directly for the business is an employee of ours. And so that means, they get sick leave, things like that. Yeah, and that was definitely an evolution, like learning all of that, finding the right payroll people, finding the right accountant. I mean, being an entrepreneur is not easy because a lot of times you're like doing things on the fly and then you're learning about compliance. And it definitely helps to have the right experts that also value and understand what you're trying to accomplish.
That's amazing. One of the things that I love about like my job and working with Indigenous entrepreneurs is just seeing those jobs being able to be created for people. It's one of my favorite things about like the field that I work in is just to be able to see that. So congratulations and good job on, creating jobs. I love to see it, the businesses evolve and grow, and be able to do that. So your business is in like kind of an interesting field, because I've interviewed a bunch of different types of entrepreneurs, but not too many healthcare professionals and entrepreneurs. So I'm wondering if you can talk about how it was navigating starting up a business in the healthcare field, because I'm sure it wasn't easy and there was a lot of things that you had to figure out in order to like just start it up and make sure that it was in line with all different kinds of rules and regulations. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, healthcare is tricky. It's definitely complex. I mean, in order, I think, to not only survive but thrive in healthcare, I think one, you have to have a passion for it because the regulations are changing and evolving, licensure requirements, insurance requirements, things like that. So you have to have a passion for it. I mean, I think that's fundamental because if you don't care about the industry that you're in, you're not going to stay on top of things. And the reason I say that is because I see in Arizona like a lot of pop-up shops. I'll see like people creating mental health companies, and within like 2 years they open and close, and all of a sudden we have people calling that are like, oh, I had this therapist and now she's leaving and da da da, and we're like, what do you mean, and I think it's part of that. It's like not staying on top of the things that you have to stay on top of. I had some benefits, like I said, being in the industry for a long time. So my background is, working in community mental health. So I worked in a very large urban treatment facility. And so I kind of grew up in that industry, in the community mental health industry as a clinician. And I worked my way up from like supervising interns to then becoming like a supervisor of like paraprofessionals. Then it was professionals. Then it was, supervising ultimately clinics and then building programs. And so I had the hands-on experience. What I didn't have was the back end. I didn't have the experience creating a budget, creating a narrative about a story if you're going to pitch for funding. Those are the things that I had to learn along the way. So I understood the fundamentals of what, you know, how to supervise people, right? As a skill, like I'm a clinical supervisor, um, but you do have to get the certifications, right? So you have to be compliant with those entities and those bodies in order to do those services. So like with Medicaid, we are an outpatient clinic. So part of it is like you have to register your clinic, right? And you have to meet the criteria. You have to have the certain amount of insurance. You have to offer workman's comp. So there's not really checklists for it. Some of it you learn as you're doing it. And I've had the benefit of having really amazing people that most of them, honestly, that I went to graduate school with that were in private practice that I could say, hey, I'm creating my own forms and I see the board regulations, but what does your form look like? Would you mind sharing it? And having really generous people say, absolutely, here are my forms. Here's what you need to do, modify them. And in the beginning, that was okay. But then as you're adding people, right? Um, Finding like we have a healthcare attorney that we work with that looks over our documents. So when we change our documents, he looks at it and makes sure, okay, are you guys compliant with the actual, law? He helped us with our employee onboarding process. Here are the documents that you need. Here are the things that you need to do. Like I knew some of that from learned experience, but actually creating the practice policies and the procedures, that can be a challenge because if you're scaling, you have to have those things in place. And especially because, again, you get back to the issue of if it's just you doing it, how do you teach someone else how to do it to help you? If you don't have a policy, if you don't have a practice, um, if it's not written down and there's not a formal statement, then it's too ambiguous, right? And the expectations aren't laid out. When is your payroll? What do people have to do? So a lot of it was getting sort of the template and then filling it in and saying, I don't have this, or I don't think this is enough, and researching, and also through trial and error, right? Like learning through the process. Because I think entrepreneurship is so much of that. It's like, oh my gosh, like I think I overpaid this position and now I'm realizing that it's not sustainable, or I didn't put enough time into this particular area, I need to spend more on marketing. And it's kind of like you're driving a ship. You have a destination in mind, but what are the barriers? What's the weather going to be like? You don't always know. And so as an entrepreneur, I think it helps to, like I said, find those people that are experts and really, like I said, have them understand what you're trying to accomplish and making sure that the price point is appropriate for the size of your business. Because, I definitely have overbought marketing, and found out, okay, I think I spent too much money and I didn't get what I really needed. But I didn't know that. So there's lessons that you learn along the way. And sometimes, the cost is your time and the cost is, you know, comes out of your revenue. And so you learn that and you're like, oh, okay, like that was a big sting. Like now I know I'm going to course correct and I'm going to try this. So a lot of it is that, like trial and error, finding the right people and giving it time. I think as an entrepreneur, one of the things I wish people had told me was that planning was really critical, that you need to give things time. Like I've started programs in my business and I didn't give them enough time. I didn't plan enough and they didn't thrive. But if I plan, if I give it enough time to grow, kind of like our ancestors, right? Like I come from like, nomadic people, right? That were very like alive. We had thriving art, agriculture, we had thriving societies, and everything was, there was planning built in. In the winter, we plan, we tell stories, we connect, we do all of those things. And I think as an entrepreneur and an indigenous entrepreneur, I'm realizing like that seasonal way of being really resonates with how my business can be successful and how I can be successful and show up as my best self for my patients, for my staff, and for people that we work with, is taking that time to really look at what is the outcome that I want, how do I get there, and who are the people that I need on my team to help me get there. But that was a development. Like I didn't know that, right?
That's beautiful. And I do think Indigenous people have such a rich history of entrepreneurship and innovation, that can be used in today's day and age in different ways, but it's always been there.
Mhm.
Um, as you kind of think about, your journey and entrepreneurship, how has it impacted your life, whether in a positive or negative way? Like what impacts has entrepreneurship and starting your own business had on you?
Oh gosh, that's a great, it's a big question. Well, originally I started out with the intention of quality of life, right? I think one of the ways that it has positively impacted me is, I prioritize dropping off and picking up my son, and it seems like a small thing, but you think about like in my industry, that's a really challenging thing to do. But because I have control over my own schedule, I build that into my schedule, where it's like I am the one that takes him to school in the morning. I am the one that picks him up. I mean, there's exceptions. It's like things that travel, work travel, meetings that you can't reschedule, things like that. But by and large, like that's our time, and that for me was huge because, like I shared with you earlier, not having that wasn't good for us, right? It wasn't good for him, and you think about it, like I'm out there helping other people, and my kid's the last one to get picked up, right? And so it gives me the ability to prioritize what's important to me, but I also had to learn that. So that was the con, is I had to learn that if I didn't build that in for myself, if I didn't make that a priority, it wasn't going to happen. If I didn't say, hey, I'm entitled to 2 weeks off every year, like I can take those 2 weeks off, and I need to delegate, and I need to make sure that everything keeps moving while I'm gone. And then when I come back, I'm back. Right. But it took time. I think the other piece was not, the thing that I learned was I didn't prioritize my own pay. I think a lot of entrepreneurs do that. I was just reading like, I think it's called Inc. It's a magazine, and they were talking about like how many entrepreneurs actually put themselves on salary and things like that. Like that's something that I just recently did. It was something that was in the plans for a long time, but actually going through the steps because it required us to change like our entity status. It just required things, like things to do, and for a long time I was like, oh, it'll be okay, I'll get there. And it's like, no, like I need that certainty too. I need that structure. I need to create that for myself. And so I think that's a part of it. Like the beauty of entrepreneurship is you can dream and you can achieve it, and you can make it the norm. You can make it the norm of your business. And really looking at why you started the business, I think is fundamental. Like, why did you start the business? Like I said, for me, it was quality of life. And that extends to our patients, right? Like, doing the low, no cost clinic, it's about making sure that there's ample opportunity for services. And that's been hard. Um, but it forced me to learn new ways, innovative ways to make that happen. So, like, we have a fiscal sponsor. And that took time. We had a fractional CFO that came to us from Common Future. I have gotten the most benefit in my business from collaboration with like-minded entities and getting support and saying, help, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I tried this, it didn't work. Because that's how I learn. Like I like to try to do things myself, and I'm stubborn. And I realized that it's helpful to be less stubborn and to ask for help when you're not sure. And like I said, now it's like I'm more proactive about, I'm going to plan things versus I'm going to be reactionary. So like one of the things we're planning now is like our job architecture. Like what is the business going to look like in the next 10 years? What's the pathway for people to be successful, to like progress if that's what they want, right? And so it's about having the vision. I think being an entrepreneur has allowed me to dream and to find ways to make those dreams happen. um, and I think the benefit of coming from, like I came from a really working class family and we were really poor. I think the benefit of coming from that background is like nothing's unachievable for me. Like I'm not afraid because this is all new. Right? It's like, oh, well, if that fails, I guess I'll figure something else out. But I don't have that. There isn't a threshold, right? And I think that's the beauty of Indigenous entrepreneurship. Like we know we come from these rich cultures. We know we come from millennia of success and struggle and resilience and beauty. And we bring that with us to our work. And I think it's just finding the way to connect back to that. And I think for me, that's been one of the benefits and the values of being an entrepreneur is I can say, I don't want to work be a partner with this company because I feel like the way they work is extractive and it's really not benefiting BIPOC people. And I don't have to necessarily say that to them. I can just say, look, it's not value aligned work. We actually created a partnership. I don't know if you saw that on our site, but that came out of like that experience of, because when you're one of the few, a lot of times people want to tokenize you. And so we're learning, okay, well, we're happy to partner with people, but we're only going to partner with value aligned entities and companies, you know.
That's beautiful. Um, I think it is important. And I was actually interviewing another entrepreneur. She's also a founder of a telehealth like startup company. It's more tech based, I think. But she was saying the same thing that it's as a CEO and founder, you it's okay to say no. Like this partnership doesn't work for me. And she kind of had to learn that, to make sure that the people you partner with are aligned with your values and your vision. And um, some of the entrepreneurs that we're working with in our program have had those same questions of like, how do I make sure that I can do what I want and not like compromise my values, and I told them, well, just make sure that you're being picky with your funders and your partners. Like it's okay to say no, even if you need money, if it's not the right fit, don't take it. So, um,
Yeah, because
it's
emotional labor is going to cost you more, right?
yeah,
Like,
definitely.
because yeah, as a small business owner, it's like, oh my gosh, I could have access to this much money and I could do this good. And because that's what we're thinking about, right? We're thinking about the good that we can do as Indigenous people, like how is this going to help community? But absolutely, it's about saying no. And I think for me too, like following your intuition, like that honed ancestral knowledge that tells you this isn't in alignment, and taking time. I met with someone recently and they said something that was like so impactful to me. They said that patience is, you know, is the enemy. Patience is the enemy of white supremacy. Because we were talking about that, like finding value aligns partners. And they said, yeah, because in BIPOC communities, it's about patience because we have to get to know you. We have to get to know who you are, what you're about, what your values are, and do they align with the values that we have? Are you going to be in community with us? Are you here to extract from us and do harm? Are you here to help us heal and connect? And I was like, that is so like crucial, right?
Yeah, definitely. That makes so much sense because I mean, working with Indigenous communities myself, it does take time and patience. And I mean, here in New Mexico in general, we have a slower pace of life, and I think there's a reason for that. Um, Kind of speaking about, boundary setting and some of your own benefits and things you've gone through starting your business, like, and then the fact that you're a mental health professional. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit towards like maybe some advice to entrepreneurs when it comes to finding that balance and also making sure you're taking care of your own mental health as a founder, and an entrepreneur because based on the work we do with our program, we do a lot of discovery, and one thing that people have expressed is a challenge and a barrier for them in either starting their business or running it is like mental health aspects. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, yeah, we do find that. I mean, being an entrepreneur really challenges all of the areas, right? It's a tax on your resources, your energy. You're required to do things that you haven't done before, so you're constantly on a learning curve. Even when things are stable, there's uncertainty. And definitely those can play into, stress and distress, I think the first thing that I would say to entrepreneurs is one, have an awareness, right? Like being aware of how do you respond to stress and having a plan in place, like creating a plan. And if you don't know how to create a plan or you're not comfortable creating a plan, I think seeking out those resources, and it can be through coaching, it can be through meeting with a mental health provider. It can be through community. Is there an elder? Is there another person that owns a business that maybe isn't like yours, but that you could kind of pick their brain? Because other entrepreneurs are great about sharing resources, especially if you come to them with some, you know, awareness of, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Would you be able to help me? And they're either going to say yes or they're going to say no. But you haven't lost anything by approaching them because you didn't have anything to begin with, right? And if one person says no, ask 5 more people, because somebody's going to say yes and somebody's going to have ideas for a solution. There's a ton of stuff out there. There's apps, that you can look at. Headspace is one, Calm is great. Because really what we're talking about with stress is learning how to regulate your nervous system, right? Because we are going to experience stress as entrepreneurs. We're going to experience challenges. We're going to experience setbacks. And the way that we address them is by having a plan for how we manage them. Now, if stress is untreated or unaddressed for a long time, that then can contribute to other things. That's where we start seeing anxiety, depression. And unfortunately, we do have a lot of traumatic and stressful situations, not only in the work that we're choosing to do, but also in our communities. And so we have to be mindful of that. We have to be mindful of, where has that come from? I think another thing to consider is that generational trauma has stripped away a lot of our natural cultural abilities. And so connecting and reconnecting to those things is really important. Thosh Collins and his partner have a book. I can't think of the name of it now. It's a really amazing book. It has a lot of stuff about like that, like indigenous teachings for wellness. I love that book. It has so many practical stories. And so really, like, I would say find that one thing. What is that one thing that you love and enjoy that helps you to go from being triggered and distressed, where you're ruminating or you're not eating? And that's really crucial, because if your nervous system is keyed up, you can't rest or digest. You can't slow down. And those are critical for us. Like, we need those periods of that to maintain our mental health. And I can share a little bit if you're interested in like ways that I do that, because I think it's like, well, how do you do it? You're a therapist, right?
Yeah, sure, if you're willing to share that.
Yeah. So the ways that I do it are, I do therapy. Like, I like therapy. Obviously I'm a huge fan of it. I feel like anybody who tries to sell you something that doesn't do it themselves, like, I question that. So yeah, therapy has been a haven for me off and on for various reasons. And sometimes the topic is entrepreneurship, like, oh my gosh, this happened, or oh, we got this contract, or I'm so stressed because I have to travel and now my schedule's out of whack, or this is amazing and I don't know what to do. It's having that person that can be that third party objective thing. And I think the thing with therapists, when you're picking a therapist, is you have to like them, you have to trust them, and you have to feel like they're a champion for your wellness. If those 3 things aren't there, then they're not the right person for you. So that's important. But like day to day, the things that I try to do is, I love animals. I'm like a crazy cat lady. I have a bunch of cats. I have a pig pug, and I do art. So like art is like my salvation. I do Navajo weaving, I do cross stitching, I do mixed media. And it's really a way for me to like disconnect from all of the things, disconnect from the working, the creating, the accomplishing, the giving, because in my industry, there's a lot of giving. Like we sit with things that are hard, and we have to give, but you can't give if you don't refill yourself. Um, and a coach, actually, she's Jacqueline Russell she also does coaching for entrepreneurs, I think. Um, I think she does it for women. I don't know if she does it for men, but I did some health coaching with her. And one of the things she said that was so amazing is she said, you can't pour from your cup unless it's overflowing. And I was like, it has to be overflowing first. Like, how? Um, Physical exercise, activity is great. Connection with culture, right? Like, I like learning songs in my language. That's like one of my 10-year goals. I know like 70% of one song in Navajo, and I'm like, I want to learn 9 more songs. So, finding those things that keep you thriving and engaged and ways that you can connect with others. I'm in clubs, I'm in like a succulent society. I craft on Sundays with my friends virtually. Um, I feel like those are like the anchors. So, like, find your anchors and know that if the work is important, it's going to get done.
It's so important to have that balance because I think a lot of times entrepreneurs are so passionate about what they're doing that they just that's all they do. And that's when they burn out is because they don't have that like balance. So I think it's good. It's important to have that other thing that you do that you enjoy that's not for work. It's just for you, for play, for your soul. Um, I definitely have stuff that I do as well, just to, keep the balance because we gotta feed those different parts of ourselves.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because I think you also have to turn off that part, the working part, you know, um, and sometimes that's hard, especially if you're ruminating over something. It's like you're thinking about it, you're thinking about it, you're trying to solve a problem. The reason that solutions come when you're in the shower or when you're doing something is because you've given your system that time to digest and process the information. And again, patience, right? It's about patience because I think for us, this is our livelihood. We're dependent on what we do to feed ourselves and feed our families. But not only that, but then if we take on the responsibility to employ people, then we have that bigger responsibility. And then how does our work affect the community? So, like for us, we have several hundred patients at any given time they're getting services from us. So, everything, yeah, behind the scenes, there's things to do. I got to go in and review progress notes. We got to sign them. Our front office person has to send in the billing. We meet every Monday, we go over the billing. All of that's in place, and I think finding that system and looking at how other people are doing things because somebody has probably found a way and you just have to modify it a little bit to make it work for you. You know, we don't have to create everything from scratch because we come from, like I said, we have millennia of experience. We don't, and I think sometimes we forget that because entrepreneurship is still a bit young for us because of systemic oppression. But the skill of being an entrepreneur is something that our people have always inherently had.
Definitely. You mentioned a lot, seeking help and looking for resources. What are some resources that you've tapped into that you've benefited from that other people might be able to tap into as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mentioned before doing like health coaching. That was something that I've been found helpful. Networking, networking I think is huge for entrepreneurs because you're likely to run across somebody that knows something and maybe going there and having some ideas or some questions that you have in mind, like maybe doing some research. So what is the particular goal of that networking event? Who's going to be there? What is it that I'm trying to get from it? um, Other resources I've used, I had a score mentor for a really long time, an individual mentor. He was amazing in the beginning, and he was the one that helped me sort of figure out, okay, now I need to hire a contractor. And he's like, oh, here's a list of 4 things you need. And then I've done entrepreneur boot camps, right? Those are amazing. If you can find an incubator, an entrepreneur incubator that, you know, is for your industry or your field, I feel like that's really helpful because again, it gives you information. I feel like all information is useful, maybe learning about accounting. And I think that's important too. Like you can learn it and you can do it, but also realizing like, is this in my wheelhouse or not? Right? Like, is this my skill set? Because I'm great about dreaming programs. I'm not so great about all of the minutia of the things, right? And so realizing that about myself, you know, finding like, you know, Hillis Parker and Associates was really important for us. I know you interviewed Amber. You know, they help us with our accounting and now we're doing budgeting with them and projections. And so that's really important because as you're growing, right, knowing where things are, finding good resources for capital. So New Mexico Community Capital has been really helpful to us. They've also provided us with a lot of technical assistance. Native Women Lead, they were also have been really helpful to us. They actually provided our first, it was the first time we ever took debt capital and learning about that. You know, and then there's technical assistance. My favorite resources are the ones that also provide technical assistance. So whether it's webinars, whether it's a lot of times they'll pay for you to meet with experts. So, you know, that's kind of how we ended up with our fractional CFO. That helped us figure out our business model because, like I said, we're kind of a weird business. We're a for-profit entity, but we have some nonprofit things that we do. And it was important for us to have the fiscal sponsor to tap into those resources. Looking at, you know, other people in your industry and asking those questions or observing, I think is important. So let's see, Native Women Lead, New Mexico Community Capital, Roan Horse Consulting has been a tremendous resource and support for us. A lot of New Mexico-based nonprofits, right? I feel like New Mexico is really like pushing for entrepreneurs, especially Indigenous entrepreneurs. So thank you guys. Common Future is a great resource. They've been a great resource for us. I think they also have an incubator program. You know, and like I said, just giving yourself time to kind of consume what's out there and spending time to meet with those people, to reach out to them and say, and having your one paragraph intro. Hi, I'm so and so. Here's what I do. I'm really interested in learning more about this. Is there anyone in your organization that would be able to help with me? I would love to meet with them via telephone or via Zoom. You know, thank you so much. I appreciate all that you do. And maybe mentioning something you like, right? Like, why are you reaching out to them? Like, I love that you do this, you know? So like, if you're interested in healthcare and you want to reach out to me, that's what you do. You send a message and it's like a one paragraph intro of who you are, what your interest is, what you're looking for, and why you want to meet me, why you want to meet me or someone else, right? You don't have to meet me. I'm just saying. But I think that has been the best resource is building relationships with people. And then what happens is if those people don't have a resource, they connect you to someone that does. And following up is important. Like if someone connects you to someone and they do a soft intro and maybe you've solved the problem, letting them know, hey, I solved the problem. Thank you, but I'm okay. But following through, I think is really crucial because people are putting their relationships on the line to introduce you to someone, not on the line, but you know, they're extending themselves. So follow up with it. And then continuing that thread. It's like, you know, in Native Women Lead, they talk about like leaving the ladder down, right? We're leaving the ladder down for other female Indigenous entrepreneurs. The other resource I will say that is really important for entrepreneurs is pitching. It was one that I was reluctant to do in the beginning, but I have been very successful pitching. And so I would say it's a skill, learning how to tell your story, learning how to articulate what your goals are and what your needs are is really crucial as an entrepreneur because you don't know who's going to ask you what you need. I've had that experience where someone said, "What do you need?" And I'm like, "I need," my laptop was dying at the time. I'm like, "I need a laptop." Like that's what I need like right now. And they were like, "Okay, do you want to pay for it? Send us a receipt, or do you want us to pay you?" I was like, "What?" Like people want to see you be successful, the right people. And so taking that and making good use of those resources is what it's about being a community, you know.
Gosh, you've given us so many good pieces of advice and insight during this interview. Um, but I am wondering if there was just like one piece of advice to an entrepreneur listening, who maybe they've started their business, want to grow it, or maybe they have an idea, but they're a little afraid to take that leap into starting their business. What's one piece of advice or wisdom that you would give them?
Just try it. You only have one life, right?
Yep, that's a good piece of advice. Thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation. You've you've given a lot of good insight from your experience, and I really appreciate your time to do this interview and sharing your story as well as your expertise and experience with us. I'm sure people listening will benefit from it. Um, if people want to connect with you further or like look more into your business, where can they find you?
Yeah, so they can find us online. The business website is www.TRSOFAZ.com. The practice number is 602-661-0200. If they ever want to reach out to me, my email is actually on there. There's a button that just says email Jordanna, and it'll literally send me an email. Those are the best ways. Thank you.
Awesome. And I'll link all of that in the description as well as the resources you mentioned. And I did look up that book that you mentioned by Dosh Collins. I think it's called The Seven Circles. Does that sound correct? All right, so I'll link that too if people want to look into it. Um, but thank you so much. And before we get off, is there anything else that you'd like to say or add? No?
Oh, no, thank you for having me. I know I talk a lot, so
Oh
hopefully
no, it was awesome. I enjoyed listening. You
that
had a lot of good things to say. So thank you very, very much.
you're welcome and thank you for having me. All right.